Well, hey, happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
He did it. Yeah. So last week, Jay was like, what am I supposed to do with that? So he's not a regular listener to our podcast, but I know you are. So I have Joe with me. I almost said Joe White. I was like, that's not right. Joe Ziz. He was able to teach yesterday. Thought you did a great job. It was awesome
thanks.
having you up there. I know you made a reference a couple of times to you being crazy because you have 6 children. Obviously, you did mention your wife. So how about you kind of introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about your family. I know some of the people listening yesterday didn't really have any reference. They were like, who is this guy up here? Not a pastor.
Yeah.
So, but technically you are because you're an elder. So
right. And
it is a weird.
And the Greek word, right, is interchangeable.
Yes.
For elder and pastor. But also, I just wanted to set expectations, right? Like, hey guys, it's been 10 years since I've preached in a church, so let's not be expecting.
They'll hold that against me.
Billy Graham this morning or something. Anyway, sorry. What's the question again?
So, who are you?
A couple ADHD
family.
kids.
Yeah.
Be fun.
Who are you? Family, life, marriage, Prescott, not Prescott. What do you do? All this stuff.
Yeah. So, okay, Joe's is. And like you said, I'm an elder. I'm actually the chairman of the elders right now. This is my last year as chairman of the elders. Next year will be my last year as an elder because we don't need to talk about terms. But I grew up in Prescott. I go back with Quad City and Prescott Christian to the late 90s, and I've been working in camp ministry since that time, basically. Yeah. I left Prescott to go to school at Manhattan Christian College in Manhattan, Kansas,
not New York, Manhattan, New York.
Yes. So the contrast is the Little Apple as opposed to the Big Apple, right?
I'm sure that's the only difference.
Yes, I'm sure it is. It's like probably one of the most diverse towns in Kansas, but it is still in Kansas. So, probably not nearly as diverse as New York, and nor does it have as good of food
or people. There's probably not as many people, right?
I
can't imagine Manhattan, Kansas is
not
booming.
As many people. Yeah, like it has grown. It's like Prescott. It has grown quite a bit, but probably the whole population is smaller than the population of one block in New York City, right? Like, so anyway, yes, yeah. Tiny by comparison. Also, I thought I grew up in a small town, right? Because Prescott, when my family moved here, late 80s, Prescott was 25,000. Prescott Valley was like maybe 4,000. Chino Valley was like 1,500, right? So the whole Quad City area, like
tiny
Tri-City area, right? It was the Tri-City area at that time. That's what it was known as. I still don't know what the Quad City really.
Jason says it's Dewey Humboldt.
Yeah,
that's what he tells us.
Which is really just Prescott. Okay, sorry, don't want to offend anybody. Again, gosh, this is going to take forever, Josh.
You're good.
I'm just so ADHD.
I love it. Okay, so you're in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yep.
I'm guessing.
Met my wife. I think the second day I was there, technically like the first full day I was there. This is a great story. I'll just make fun of her in a way that maybe makes her look better than me because that's not hard to do. Met her first day I was there, and this is we're introduced by a mutual friend, and her first words are, "Wow, Joe, it looks like maybe you could use an iron or." I don't know, a wife, I guess, that could just iron your clothes for you. And I thought, well, the latter sounds better than the former. And I married her. No, there's so much more than that. But
she just insulted you day one.
Yeah, day one.
Love.
Like minute one, moment one.
Love.
Right? And of course, I'm like bachelor who's like got, a clean laundry hamper and a dirty laundry hamper, right? And there's no hangers or shelves or any of that stuff. So, so I was also like raised by wolves. Single mom household. I was either raised by wolves or by the church, depending on the day.
Yeah.
And Heidi, right, grows up in like nuclear, wholesome, small town Kansas, right? Like she's basically like Superman's parents, like that's Plainville instead of Smallville, right? So Yeah, complete opposite in every single way.
Yeah.
So she's wonderful, and right, like the rest of us, somehow convinced her to
married. How long you guys been married?
Say yes. We've been married a little over 21 years. 52502. It's really easy to remember.
Attaboy. You did good.
Yeah.
Kids?
And we have, so maybe I should talk about the 6 kids that I mentioned.
Yeah, you did mention 6 kids, and that's why you're up at 3 a.m. So that would help for context. Yes.
Okay, so 6 kids. I thought 2 kids would be great. I grew up in a family where we had five kids, and I was 2 of 5. So I thought 2 was a great number. Heidi thought 4 was a great number, so we just compromised and added 4 and 2 and got 6. No, but actually we had 4 kids, the normal, natural way.
Yeah.
And so that's Jarrett, Calvin, Brecklin, Cambria in order, right? 2 boys first. Any potential suitors for those girls have to work their way through those guys before they even get to me. And then I'll say this wrong and Heidi can correct me later, but 2016, I think, was when we started doing foster care. We had we had sort of a unique story, but kind of all foster care stories are unique.
Right.
We had about 7 placements in about 7 months. And right, so just like varying amounts of time. But then Siler, we always have to like preface this story because it's so rare in foster care that I don't want to like set anybody up to assume that this is just what happens.
This is the norm.
But Siler was actually his biological mom was 18 and his dad was 16, and mom was in denial that she was pregnant up until like maybe 2 months before he was born. And so she delivered him in the hospital in PV, and then technically, legally speaking, abandoned him. Her intent though was like safe haven, right? I'm going to leave him safely in the hospital.
Yeah.
Where
he'll be taken care of.
And so the judge, in that case, fortunately honored her intent rather than just the legal, behavior. But and part of that was like the judge herself was like, I don't even know. Like, it's so rare. She's like, I don't even know what the law is on this. I need a little bit of time. And so, anyway, Siler came to us at day 2 of his life and has remained with us ever since. And most people assume that he's our biological son, probably because he and I share some similarities. And he's just a bundle of joy. Yeah. And then so technically Abrielle is older than Siler, but Siler came before Abrielle. So anyway, number 5 and number 6 are interchangeable numbers. But anyway, Abrielle spent half her life in the system before we adopted her, and about half of the time that she was in the system, she was with us. She was with 3 different families after she was pulled. And so she's probably got a little bit of a rougher road ahead for her. But anyway, Jarrett's 18, right? He's the oldest. So Siler's 6. I mentioned him only in the 3rd service. And I really was like, man, I wish I would have thought about that before. But anyway, so Jarrett, 18, Calvin's going to be 16 in a few months. Brecklin's 13. She turned in January, so we got 3 teenagers out of the 6.
That's why he's up at 3 a.m.
And then we got the 3 littles.
That makes sense.
So yeah, we've got a busy home. And Heidi.
That's a very great
good
way to say that. A busy home. Yes, I mean 4. I'm pretty busy, so add 2 more in that. It seems like a party.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Heidi, sorry, and just to kind of wrap that up or put a bow on it. Heidi has homeschooled our kids. Jarrett was in public school for about 6 months, and she's actually been homeschooling our kids ever since then. The oldest boys do ASU prep online. But yeah, she's stayed at home, and our kids do not lack by any means for a social gathering between camp and
so
church.
Camp, so you're you work at what camp in town?
So UCYC, one of I think like 25 camps in the Prescott area, which it seems weird, right, for the size of Prescott, but you got to remember that it's close access
to a lot of things,
to the mountains from the desert, right? And between Las Vegas and Phoenix Metro and even the LA Basin, there's a lot of population, right? In the Southwest. So anyway, UCYC is just one of a couple dozen, and we might be the largest. That doesn't make us any better than anybody else. But brings some unique challenges for sure.
Yeah.
And we've got a fantastic team. A couple dozen people work at UCYC full time year round. I know, like most people think of camp and then like, well, what do you do the rest of the year, right? Just like preachers, what do you do the rest of the week?
We only work on Sunday.
Yeah. So and
only if you're preaching. So really, we've all been off for ever. Yeah, Jason's been off for 8 weeks. He hasn't done anything.
Well, ultimately, right? That's why Jason passed out in the first place. Poor guy has to work 4 hours a week. He needed a nap. Like, geez, give him a break.
Love it.
I will continue to make fun of him for this.
I think we can never let it. Yeah, you can't let it live. Now that he's
only because,
especially because he's okay, and
exactly.
Yeah, and I'd say you've known him for quite a while now, so it makes it even better.
Yeah. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah. What else is that?
That's a great intro. Yeah. No, I know. I think part of it that's helpful is people just getting to know you. Obviously, you serve behind the scenes mostly.
Yeah.
People don't know what you do for our church, and just some of the stuff that's been happening and going to be happening. Obviously, you and those other men in the room are a big part of that. Our discipleship group stuff came out of the vision from our elders, and I think those who are in that and experiencing what those are about have benefited greatly, myself included. So it's always great to put faces and stories with kind of the wizard behind the the Great Wall. So again, because like I say, when I do a discovering, I go, we've got 6 elders and and they serve and they're in PV. We've got a couple elders, and it's not intentional that you're like hiding or don't want to be known. It's just that you operate in the fabric of the church like everybody else, but you do have a unique role that sets the vision and tone for our church. So I think it's great that people got to see that yesterday and go, oh, okay, cool. I know one now. I can go to him when I'm mad.
Yeah, I might have gotten a little bit of that yesterday. Not too much.
Yeah, not too much. So again, I thought it was great. Again, I'm so excited that we talked about Silence and Solitude. So it was in the original run of what we're going to do for Variety Pack, and then it kind of fell out, and then it came back in at the last minute, and I was like, yes, because, man, I think uniquely our culture, like you said, it is created in a way to bring about distractions. That just very little thing you talked about, being on your TV, scrolling through something else, the watch dings, time to get up, it is nonstop. So much so, like, they built in now the focus settings on your watch or your phone because they realized how many people were getting just inundated with the dings, the notifications. And it's hard in a very busy world to be still and silent before God at times. So I'm glad we talked about it. So as always, I know there's stuff that you couldn't put in the sermon just because that's just the nature of the beast, right? There's always stuff you want to get in, but you can't. And, there's the whole story that we talked through when we did the sermon prep about Jesus and the Garden of Gethsemane, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't add that too. Like that's a whole story in and of itself. So what would you add in, or could you, if you were like, man, if I could have 5 more minutes and really clarified X, Y, and Z, I think it would have been helpful for people. Because again, I think for a lot of these spiritual disciplines, they're brand new to people. Even people who've been in the church for a really long time. Sure. I think that's what we've been hearing is like, oh man, I've never done this. Like I've never sat in, because again, we think silence and solitude, we think a monk.
Yeah.
And that's probably as you said, Jesus was not a monk.
Right.
He lived and
deeply engaged with people.
Yeah. So, and I know you had a line, but you didn't say. I heard it. You were talking about being an introvert, right? And yeah, like not just introverts should use silence and solitude, and it can't be an excuse just not to be with people. I'm in silence and solitude today, people. Let me be. So what would you add? Anything you'd flesh out deeper or go further in? Yeah. Anything like that?
Well, let me maybe take this in two parts, and I'll let you remind me what the other part is.
Love it.
But it just sort of like let me start with what I pulled out.
Yes.
And then I can talk about what I might have added in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So I pulled out, the fact that C.S. Lewis has a quote. I'm going to butcher it completely, but it's this idea of like, in our pleasure, God whispers, I think he says, in our constant or in our conscience, I think he actually said, God speaks, and in our pain, God shouts, right? Mm. And of course, I don't think actually that God's volume changes so much as our attention changes, right? And so that, there's a lot just in terms of, how we hear the voice of God in the midst of pain, right? Hmm. And so the Garden of Gethsemane, of course, is another picture of that with Jesus. I decided to really just land on, right, like, hey, what does this look like in terms of a habit of Jesus, and again, right, like how would we emulate that as a habit of ours? Yes. But I think for sure there's a ton there in terms of pain, and I can actually point to a couple of stories, and maybe even it causes of pain, but yeah, Jesus, again, if you just stay in Mark, I think, and you read his account of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think there's 3 different times in the garden that he actually retreats to pray, right? He comes back and he's like, he finds his closest friends have fallen asleep. Yeah. He's like, what? Come on, guys. Like, yeah, what are you doing? Can't you just keep watch for a few minutes while and again, there's definitely an intimacy in that solitude and in that silence, because Jesus knows what's at hand, right? He knows what's coming. And he even, you can almost, not almost, you can clearly see the tension between like the divinity of Jesus and the humanity of Jesus, right? In this, like, Father, if, right, this can pass, if you can take this cup from me, but also not my will, but yours. So there's definitely an intimacy there. Nate can edit out whatever, right? But I'll share a story in this regard, just from my own experience, as an elder. Just kind of hearing the voice of God in pain, and it really, like, I didn't even share this in the run through, because it added, I think the message was like 45 minutes, and I was like, I got to pull this, and I don't know that I would have kept my composure. Yeah. And so it's probably a little safer to lose my composure in here than definitely. Than heck yeah. But anyway, 2020, without a question, right, was hardest year for a lot of us, especially in the leadership space. And 2020 was ridiculously hard for the leader of a large camp, right, when group gatherings are canceled, and we, practically speaking, because we were not able to do summer camp, that meant a loss of like 95% of our revenue for the year, right? So 2/3 of our revenue comes in the summer, but again, I mean, we were closed from mid-March to mid-November, I think, of 2020. And so our team, over that time, and Nate, of course, is behind the scenes here, but Nate was along for the ride. Nate was on the team at UCYC, and so even he's going to get probably a little glimpse into the behind the scenes here. But just we'll just keep it between the 3 of us, right? Right. I'm kidding. So the there were a lot of challenges. It was really hard. Our team ultimately was reduced from about 45 year-round people to about 16. And right, every one of those represents, families and livelihoods, right? And just like heartbreaking decisions, but also you lost 95% of your revenue, right? You gotta make those hard decisions. That's leadership.
Yeah.
Well, so June 30th, 2020, sort of an easy date to remember because it also just happens to be my birthday, right? But
really,
yeah,
that's my youngest's birthday.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the day before, June 29th, it was when like there were cases that were starting to rise both in Yavapai County and then in Arizona as well, and Governor Ducey at the time came out and shared some updates, whatever, and then sort of local. That was when, if we can think back to that time, right? There's so much fog, but that was when the grocery stores started becoming a lot more intentional about asking people to wear masks, and so anyway, we had already lost summer, but now because of this rise in cases, we were losing retreats that had booked because we had lost summer, right? And so there were some churches that were like, we still want to do something. Can we just do something on our own, right? And so what that meant was that the morning of June 30th, I was going to have to go in with some of our leadership team and really build a strategy around who is the next round of layoffs and what makes the most sense. And so that's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
Right? Simultaneously, we had a guy on our facilities team at the time who went into the hospital on the 29th of June. And we didn't know, right, that he had COVID. We also didn't know, some underlying conditions. But on June 30th, I got a text at 6:30 that morning that his heart had stopped, and they couldn't revive him. And I'm sitting there, just shocked. I'm getting ready for the day, right? Like, and I'm sitting there stunned, and I'm also thinking, I don't have time to process this right now because I got to walk into this meeting and make these hard decisions. But also I can't ignore it because I still have to address it with the team, right?
Right.
And I haven't even talked about the elder role on this day. So then issue number 3 is that the elders are going to get together that morning and talk. We had closed down. I can't remember for how many weeks, but we had reopened at that point.
Yeah.
And the elders were going to meet and discuss whether or not we needed to close our doors again or stay open. And I remember, I get that text and I'm just in shock. And Pete was just, again, Nate remembers Pete. Pete was like just a sweetheart of a man, like just he was with us a short time, but he's like a camp grandpa, right? To all the kids, all the camp kids, staff kids, and so it just was so out of the blue.
Right.
So I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have time to process this. I've got to walk into this other meeting and make some really stupid, hard decisions. And I've got this meeting with the elders that I don't have time for.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this meeting. And so I went into that meeting, and I think I was the chair. That was my first year as the chairman of the elders, which, by the way, all that really means is that I have a gift for facilitating meetings. So that's my role as chairman. It doesn't make me sometimes I'm referred to as like the head elder or the lead elder, which really just makes me think of Caiaphas, right? The high priest. I'm like, no. That's not my role. I just happen to facilitate.
You're one of 5, one of 6. Yeah. Yep. I always try to say that too.
Yep.
People like, Jason's not like 50% of the vote in there, guys.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Maybe 12% of the vote or something. Yeah. Like that. Anyway, so I walked into that meeting and because I lead the meetings, I really was just, I was honest with them, but I say, guys, here's the deal. I trust you all with this decision. I don't have a lot of capacity for this decision right now. I've got a lot of hard things that I've got to deal with right now.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my take, but ultimately, I trust you with the decision. And I just said, and this was, again, I didn't recognize it as the voice of God coming to me until after. And this is often the case too.
Yeah.
But I said to them what I thought, and at that time I had thought it was my own thought, right? But I just said, guys, here's my take. If the grocery stores are considered essential and the grocery stores are staying open, and Jesus says man does not live on bread alone, but on the word of God, then it seems like maybe it would make sense that we would also stay open.
Yeah.
And I know that there are a lot of hurting people right now.
Yeah.
And I know that for them to be able to come here might be the only thing they got going for them right now.
Yeah.
So again, that's my take.
Yeah.
But I trust you guys to make this decision. Well, I don't know where everyone actually came into that meeting from.
Yeah.
I only know that there was one other elder that specifically said, Joe, when you said that, it turned my thinking immediately, like 180. And it made me realize. And again, let's be clear here. This is not Joe's intelligence, right? This is not like, this is the word of God, applied as even a question mark, right?
Yeah.
In this context, like, and that's the power of the word of God, and that, right? Like, and again, so when we're talking about sitting in silence and listening to the voice of God, again, contrast it with the word of God. If it doesn't align with the word of God,
right,
then don't necessarily just assume that it's the word of God, right? The voice of God coming to you. But in this particular case, it ended up ultimately making sense, and we stayed open. And again, I'm glad that we did. I'm sure again we can look back, and we can also all as armchair quarterbacks diagnose everything
that happened
we made incorrectly, correctly, and everywhere in between. But anyway, so I think that's just an example though of like when we're sitting in pain, I think we are more sensitive to the voice of God, even when we don't recognize it at the conscious level. I think we're more sensitive. And so if we're intentional, like Jesus was, I think there's more of a likelihood that we will discern, the voice of God through the word of God. I think the other thing, so that's kind of what I took out.
Yeah. And again, that's if you have a habit of that. So let me ask, did you have a habit before that 2020 of silence and solitude?
No. Great question.
Yeah.
And just in all honesty and transparency, no.
Yeah.
No.
Did that bring about that season?
I would say it brought about a greater reliance on God, but not necessarily more intentionality with the presence of God, right?
Yeah.
Again, that's another book. I know that we're putting this book up on the website. This is Ruth Haley Barton's Invitation to Silence, Solitude and Silence. But another book that I'm sure you're familiar with, Josh, is Practicing His Presence, and I think it's like Brother Lawrence. And another guy. I mean, if you really want to write like that, that's pretty intense. But sorry, again, ADHD.
We're talking that season, like not maybe developing this rhythm and thing, but not being intentional.
So I think maybe what the way I would characterize it is not that it yes, it did come out of that, but again, not with intentionality at first. It was more like the true desire for it came out of that, right? And I mean, part of that too is just like, when I mentioned, I think in one of the services yesterday, or maybe a couple. I don't know. Anyway, I got a little bit of the sermon hangover maybe this morning, but it's the I had just said the bit about, right, like in contrast to Jesus's full day of ministry, I consider myself driven, and I consider myself an achiever, right? Like, and I want to get some stuff done. But I think at that point in my sort of leadership journey, I had operated out of my capacity, as opposed to discovering exactly what my capacity was.
Yeah.
And in 2020, it was made very clear.
Yep.
Where my threshold was, and maybe even expectations beyond what that threshold was. And so there was just the, like, I'm out, guy. Like, I got nothing. So you're going to have to deliver here, because I'm tapped.
Yeah.
So anyway, the desire, more so than
the actual. But then, we look at the Clear, which I've read that book as well, the James Clear book, Atomic Habits, mm-hmm. right? Then you had to build the system, because again, the desire only takes us so far, right? We actually have to have something in place that helps us follow through with the desire.
Yeah.
Like that's the reality of this. And, so hopefully through all of these sermons is that we've convinced you of the why, mm-hmm. And now the hope would be that all of us begin to put in practice some very practical systems that help us achieve this thing that we want to do, and now see as like, oh, I should be doing this. Like, it should be something that's in my life,
Yeah, I think my encouragement for sure would be, if you can have this system in place before the pain comes, because the pain's going to come.
Oh, it's coming.
Right?
It's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah.
We don't want it to come. We don't want to think about it coming, and it's coming. But when it comes, if the system's already in place, you're light years ahead.
Yeah.
And I think I would also say, you're asking about building the system. I really appreciate great systems. I don't necessarily think of myself as a systems designer, right?
Yeah.
And so even just, for the message, it was really more like I was capturing some of what I do and some of what I ought to also do more of, right?
Yeah.
And again, what is helpful for sure. Like, I didn't. There's no theory in there for sure.
Right.
I mean, I guess it's theory for anybody that hasn't done it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was more of just whereas again, on the opposite end of me is my wife Heidi, who is a genius at developing systems. She just develops systems everywhere she goes. She just can't even help it. Like, she just does it without even thinking about it. I maybe more discover systems.
Fall into it.
Yep.
Whoops.
Yeah. Well, there's some falling into it, and then there's also, right, like, there's some seeing systems, and then applying it, and then there's also, Heidi, I need a system for this, because
it's not working.
This is messy, and it's inefficient and whatever.
Yeah.
But
all right. So the second one was the stuff that was in there, or anything you would go further in, flesh out deeper, anything that you're like, I feel pretty good. It's always any questions you may have got at Pastor's Point, or somebody was like, man, I didn't really understand that piece of it, just to help give more context.
Yeah. Well, I think the only thing in there that, like, I really felt maybe I could expand on, and again, what I would say is I still have more of, like, what I might have added in versus what I took out.
Added
right?
in. Yeah.
But I think again that, I think it was my fourth point in the system, where it's the idea of, like, actually maybe it was wherever it was. Sorry, forgive me. Like, remind yourself of of why you're there.
Yeah, it's third. That was number 3. Only reason, because I know number 4 is because you used the word whom.
Yep, that's right.
Is that?
That's
right.
And
I instantly thought of an office quote, and I was like,
yeah.
Is that the right way to use whom?
Yeah, P.S. P.S. Sorry. Right, like, there's my style, I suppose. It's hard to call it a preaching style when you do it every 10 years or so, but my style obviously is, like, very conversational.
Right.
Like, I just want to be a part of the conversation. I realize I'm dominating the conversation because you're all listening and I'm the only one talking. But um, sorry, I lost my point again. There you go. This is like, let's just title this the ADHD.
We're talking about the word whom.
Forever. Whom? Yes, thank you.
I got you.
So as I'm writing it, conversationally, I would never use the word whom. Conversationally, I never use.
Who does?
The word whom. Well, there are fantastic people in my life who do.
Whom do?
Who do? Oh gosh, that would be terrible. Whom do?
Whom do? I heard it. Anyway, like, I don't know if I ever heard Joe use that word. Interesting.
But
I think that's right, though.
But I think in that context that it is correct.
It was very
Remind
correct.
yourself of whom you're with.
100%.
And every fiber in me wanted to say who
I'm sure
you're with.
Yep.
Because conversationally, that's how I would say it. But anyway.
Number 3, back to the why.
Regardless. Yes. Remind yourself why you're there. Again, I added in that piece with Siler, my youngest son, my youngest child, and how, he does it. He gets up earlier than any of the other kids. And oftentimes he's up, I guess, actually, he's not usually up before Heidi. But anyway, when he comes up, right, he's just in snuggle mode. And he's probably there for about 20 minutes or so, right? And after that, he's in like buzz around the house and yard mode, right? So you take advantage of the opportunity when you get it. But it does remind, right? And there's so many parallels, right, between, I've said before, because I've fostered and adopted children, it gives me a little bit of a flavor of that aspect of God who has adopted us.
Yeah.
Right? There are also other parents who have experienced things that I've never experienced, like, and again, maybe even just because of the age of my kids, but like there are parents who identify with the prodigal father that God is, right? Because they have kids that are either wandering or they have returned, right? But in that regard, they still love these kids who are making maybe less than stellar choices.
Right.
So it's just, anyway, that, all that to say that piece, I think most parents, and like I said, even grandparents can remember that, whether with their own kids or with their grandkids, that idea of like, some of our kids are more snuggly than some of our other kids. And, again, you take it when you can get it. And so, but it's a reminder of the greatest father, the best father, the good father. Who, if I enjoy being with my son, it pales in comparison,
right,
to the Father in heaven who wants to be with you, with us. So
then, as somebody who is a driven, task-oriented, I want to get things done person, to just be is really challenging, right? I have that as well. Like, your mind is 100 places. Yeah, we were talking yesterday with Tim, another one of the elders. Just, he's much more in his head kind of guy. Mm-hmm. It is so hard to shut that down.
Yeah, I would even just slight nuance to what you said, Josh. I would say, like, my wife is very task oriented. I'm very idea oriented.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So like,
yes, maybe that's me too. Yeah.
I dream and then I develop people and really like get great people to
even better
to make the ideas reality. Right.
Oh,
but also, right, the curse that comes with that is when you live in the land of ideas, like that's a really busy space. and again, if you're going to get a couple good ideas here and there, you got to also have a lot of ideas.
About 100.
So you're constantly just juggling all these ideas in your head. So it's incredibly hard to shut that down. But I would say, even, right, like, again, Heidi and I are very different, and she may not. It may be easier for her to shut that down than it is for me, but it might be also harder for her to shut down those tasks, right? Doing,
Martha.
I want to stay exactly the Martha. I want to stay busy. I just want to help people. I want to serve people. I want to, right, and to just slow down and reflect. And that's another piece that, again, like there's so much here. When I first started writing this, if I'm really honest, when I first started studying and beginning to write this and then writing this, initially I was like, what am I going to talk about on the podcast? How much really is there?
How much really is about silence and solitude?
Right.
Yeah.
And the more I got into it, the more I was like, oh gosh, not only am I again needing to pull stuff out,
right,
but there's all kinds of stuff that I didn't talk about. Like, again, I think Elijah, right? Like there's this whole, is it First Kings or Second Kings 19? First Kings, like right after Elijah has this spiritual victory on Mount Carmel, right? A huge deal, and also like he just walks into that with such confidence.
Oh yeah,
right? Such confidence, and sure enough, right? Like God is victorious, and we know the story. If we don't know the story, then go read the story.
Yeah.
Because powerful story about God and a spiritual victory. But in the next moment, like I said, right, in the message over and over, like in the next moment, word gets back to Jezebel, and Jezebel's like, if by tomorrow at this time I have not done the same to you as you've done to my prophets who all are telling me what I want to hear, and all of a sudden Elijah goes from confidence to
running,
fear.
I'm the only one left.
Fear and flight,
yeah.
and
Paul talks about it in Romans, and we talked about this story in Romans.
Yeah, so even desperation, like even beyond desperation, really, like in depression, Elijah is like, just take my life, God.
Yeah.
Right? I'm done.
Yeah. I'm the only one left.
And I'm sure, again, a lot of us in 2020 were like, Jesus, come.
Yeah.
Come soon.
Yeah.
I remember Jason preaching a sermon on, it's selfish of us to say, Jesus, come soon. And we just want to go because of how many people don't know him yet.
Yep.
Right? And I thought, you're right. It is selfish.
Very.
Because I still just want to go.
Yeah. 2020, man, for me too, was a lot of reading, a lot of, I picked up Pete Scazzaro and Rich Velotis, another two authors that talk about prayer and silence and solitude, and they've got a ton of great resources. Pete Scazzaro's got the whole emotionally healthy leader.
Pete Scazzaro will wreck you.
Yeah.
If you're feeling good about anything in your life, just read some Pete Scazzaro and he'll humble you.
And then the guy took over from Rich Velotis, he talked about this idea of silence and solitude in prayer. And I remember the first time I did it, I set my alarm for 2 minutes. I wasn't even trying 5 or 10. I felt like that was really, really bold. 2 minutes, set my alarm for 2 minutes. And I get into it and I'm like, all right, I did it. Man, yes. 30 seconds in. I'm like, the what? Like I picked my phone up because I couldn't just wait for the thing to ding because that would just be too much. 30 seconds. And I felt like it had been an eternity. Right? Like I was like, oh my goodness. So what you were saying yesterday is like, you just do it faithfully. Right? And I've gotten better, but it's still not great. Someday I sit down in my place and I'm like, my brain is everywhere, but in that moment, right? But like, I'm just trying to show up, just trying to be faithful. And again, so Velotis said, if your mind wanders 10,000 times, it's 10,000 opportunities to return back to the presence of God. And I'm like, okay, so that's what I'm gonna do, right? Like this is kind of what you said yesterday. I don't need to think about that. Wait a minute, I can get to that. It's 3 a.m. I can come, that we have these opportunities to do that kind of stuff. And so but it was out of pain, right? 2020, even I think for everybody, well, for some people it was different, but for me it was I need deeper.
Yeah,
I need deeper systems. Like I had an okay system, but it was not giving me the depth that I needed to deal with heaviness that, and it's, as it says, you pastor too, the things in which some of those pastoral calls in that year were crazy. But so it's just super helpful to have that system now that, again, and it's not perfect. I'm not always hitting home runs, but I feel like I'm a lot further down the road than where I was before, for sure.
Yeah. I think what's more motivating even than like, the like, hey, this is a great system in case you're sitting in pain, because we know, of course, right? Like
yeah,
most all of our listeners, as well as those right, in our church and in our community. We're all experiencing some degree of pain, right?
Right,
it's not
some
perfect.
Level. Right.
Like our lives are not perfect. Our experience is not perfect.
Yeah.
But even more motivating than the like, hey, this is a fantastic system for when
I'm in pain.
You're in the middle of pain.
Yep.
It's the idea of like what you experience is peace, right? In the presence of Jesus, what you experience is peace in the storm, right? In the pain, and so that's far more appealing, because I think the other side of this like constant distraction that we all know this.
Yep.
And there's a ton of research out there that backs it up, and I think also I think the Surgeon General came out recently and was talking about like, the negative impact of social media on anxiety in kids today is like crazy. Anyway, all of that to just say the really negative side of all of this distraction is just the anxiety, right, that comes with it. And on the flip side, a few moments in the presence of Jesus brings peace. And I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not saying like this is a cure all for depression or anxiety.
No, definitely not.
That. But it just is the general anxiety that we all can, experience as a result of scattered and disorder in our lives.
Yeah, because there's
a few moments with Jesus is just like,
there's some anxiousness in all of us, right? There's a book I just read about that kind of the anxious leader, right? And just how it was the telegram system that brought anxiety into to the world, because you could now be connected to the first world event, like a major volcano or something eruption, and the rest of the world knew about it. And it was great in that way, but it also then guys working in Wall Street, right? Now could be up when people are in London, and they could be communicating with each other. And so literally the world just didn't stop. That's what I think technology, like, again, we say, is the phone, like they were dealing with it too, obviously not on the scale that we are, but they still had it. And all these studies talked about the depression rates and all the things of workers now is like you were always available. And I think that's what distractions do. And so there is no like you push pause and make yourself unavailable except to the one person that matters, right? Like that's a piece of the silence and solitude, at least for myself, that's been the most helpful. And some of those habits have turned over into other things, right? Like not having the phone on during work, or just having the focus on so only certain people can connect with me so that I can stay focused and get my tasks, do the things, or having 30 minutes of dream, whatever, it spills over into other areas because I go, this was so good to not have all that craziness going on for that short period of time. Man, what would it look like to do for longer? And again, all this, they value the multitask stuff, like that you can do multiple things at once. So to just sit and be is like, but I'm not doing anything. Like I'm not accomplishing. What's the, and so if you're highly driven, it helps you to just kind of back that off and go, it's good.
Yeah. So that's another thing, Josh, I think that I did not touch on, or another dot that I didn't connect that I would have loved to have touched on. And it's just this idea that like, not only was it a regular rhythm, again, I think maybe the most important thing was, right, consistency over intensity. Jesus did this every day.
Every day.
Right. It wasn't just that Jesus did it in intense moments.
Yep.
He did it every day. But it does seem like he did it before and after big things, right? Like he did it before he was arrested and taken to the cross. He did it after the Sermon on the Mount. He did it, right, like after all of this healing and driving out demons. And right? And I think that's the other thing that, like, again, the story of Elijah highlights for us is you can have these spiritual victories, right? Even probably, right, like for Jason and for the other, preachers, that, right, like I have a little bit more empathy for you guys right now after yesterday, because I've never felt so confident walking into a speaking engagement. It was actually really weird for me because I'm used to a little nerves. But afterward, after that third service, it was just like,
yeah,
like, and I remember telling Heidi ahead of time, like, don't probably expect a whole lot of energy from me this afternoon. I'm just assuming I'm going to be I had no idea how tired I was actually going to be. And it was like, I was telling Jason this morning, I was too tired to nap. He's like, did you go home and take a nap? No, I was too tired to nap. I just like stared at a wall.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like a small example, because I feel great this morning, right?
Yeah.
But that's a small example of the, like, and you guys know this, and we know this in camp. It's different rhythms, different cadences, but right, like pre-Easter, pre-Christmas, you guys are going to get hit. I mean, like, the enemy's going to come in here. He's going to start trying to divide, marriages, so that you walk into the office with a cloud over you before you go. I mean, and right, like, you get ready to preach on Sunday. That's true, but you get ready to preach when everybody's inviting family and friends for a big event. It's 10 times. And it's the same thing at camp. I try to remind our crew every spring as the lead up to summer, when again, literally thousands of kids are going to hear the gospel and are going to be challenged, right, to move closer to Jesus. We're going to get hit before, and we're going to get hit with discouragement after.
Oh, Sunday's my worst day temptation wise. After I teach, it's awful. The enemy is
all the unhealthy coping mechanisms. They're like,
the enemy is everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that's why so Monday is like, you got to get up, you got to do what you would normally do, even though you're probably really exhausted. Like, you have to fight to get out of, for me, because I'm an extrovert. Like, I'm actually like jazzed, like when I leave on a Sunday, but I'm exhausted, right, all the way too. And so, because I've had like 1,000 conversations that I've started and had them for 1 minute, and so there's no fulfillment on my end. So I'm just, and I love it, and I love being with people, and I'm so, but like I said, when I can't nap, I'm just like, hey, how you doing? We gonna talk more? And my wife's like, please leave me alone, because she is the opposite, right? She is very much an introvert, and she loves people, but she has her fill, and is like, I need a break. So, like, we don't chat on Sunday afternoons.
Yeah.
So that alone moment, my mind is like, the enemy is all over it. So it's like, I have to develop within me some really healthy things that help me. And then Monday is really important for me to make sure that I'm like, get up, I'm active, do something, right? Make sure I'm reading, spending some quiet, like, even more so. They always joke, pastors that don't quit Monday. But it's a thing. You feel so discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the enemy, because you do feel like, man, you are battling for people's soul. Like, I was telling you that yesterday, like, one of the quotes Comer talked about is like, we're fighting a spiritual battle. I think that's what the disciplines this time that we've been talking about all of these have done for me. When I look at Jesus, he was very, very aware that there was an enemy that wanted him to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just you talking about camp, we got all these kids going to hear the gospel. On the other end, the enemy doesn't want any of that to happen.
That's right.
And all of these disciplines situate us in a way that we actually have to first acknowledge there's somebody on the other side of this who wants nothing but my destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if we don't take that seriously, then really these disciplines don't matter, right? If I can just fight in my own strength, then it doesn't matter. But if I'm realizing I'm fighting something much greater than me, man, these things, again, at least for me this summer, that's the takeaway it's been for me, is like, man, I got an enemy who wants me to lose. God has given me all these tools, these things that I can implement in my life that would actually help in the long run, just me to grow closer to them. And then as I do that, like you said, those two other things happen, right? As I'm more with God, then yes, I become more like Jesus. And yes, then I will do the things that Jesus would do for other people. So just a great reminder for me.
Yeah. This, like, I didn't say this yesterday. This is probably, get your notepads out, right? This is the most tweetable thing I'll say between the services and this podcast. What has your attention has your life. It's got everything, right? Like, what has your attention has your life. We've talked in the church for decades about time, talent, treasure, right? What has your attention has your time, your talent, and your treasure, right? And so that's what this really is about, is remembering that, like, there are so many things competing for your attention. What there really is an enemy that's competing for your attention, because if he can distract you, then he's not losing ground.
Yeah.
So also, right, what that means is there are some good distractions.
Yeah.
And those good distractions are like Jesus' ministry was filled with them.
Yeah.
Right. And the good distractions are, again, like ministry to people, right? Like taking care of people. When the opportunity presents itself in front of you to do what Jesus would do in your shoes, that's not like, well, sorry, hold on. I'll be back.
I'll be back. Put a pin in that.
I need to go get some time alone real quick. That's where as an introvert, we're not talking about solitude in the presence of Jesus. We're talking about isolation from community, right? And that's a contrast I didn't talk about. But introverts are praised by extroverts for their like natural ability to engage in silence and solitude, and that's a lie. That's a lie. We do not engage in silence and solitude. We engage in isolation.
Yeah.
And we are not quiet in our heads. You don't hear it, and so you assume that, like, oh yeah, they're really. And yeah, sure, we probably observe a little more because we're talking less, and we, but man, I think extroverts are probably better listeners oftentimes than I am, and everybody thinks I'm a good listener because I'm just quiet in the background. And in reality, people are like, "What do you think about that, Joe?" And it's like, wait, what were we talking about again? So anyway, so there's a difference between, right, like engaging in the, like, no, you have the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus right now in this moment.
Yeah.
But also it's a distraction from what you were doing in the moment, or what you wanted to be doing in the moment. And that's like lean in.
Yeah.
Right. Just like Jesus did. Jesus was on his way to retreat. Right. And the crowds are coming. And he's like, okay, let's heal some more people.
Let's do the thing. Yeah.
Let's drive out some more demons.
And you can only do that if the other moments are very structured and spent, and like you had a good system, clearly. Yeah. Right. You know, I always try to tell young pastors, like, man, if you can make sure you structure your stuff, then, because pastoral ministry is a lot of just things every day are different, and just good distractions happen. And I want to be done with the things that I need to get done so that I can always do those things. Because that's the stuff that I want to do usually. I want to sit with people and pray with people and have those conversations with people. But I also have other things just that need to be done, like all of us have within our work and our jobs. Mm-hmm. And so building great systems, even in that way, for me, has allowed me to have opportunities to just be more like Jesus and not miss out on that stuff. Because that's the stuff that ultimately too is super life-giving and just so fulfilling. So
right. I think we sometimes maybe get the sense, maybe it's just me, but we get the sense that Jesus was just spontaneous, and with that, right, like carefree, and just kind of like went along for the ride. And the reality is, like, he was so strategic.
Yeah.
Right? He had a very clear mission, and he was very strategic about what you're talking about, Josh, is just like creating margin to be spontaneous. Yeah. And so with his intentionality and strategy, he was, sorry again for all the hand movements. I'm sure it's not ideal on the podcast here, but he was so intentional and strategic in creating margin.
Yeah.
That then he had the margin out of which to minister.
There's a great book about margin too, I read. That's a whole nother topic. When you're talking about silence and solitude, is that's the other. We just don't have any margin in our life to do these kinds of things. And so, man, we could go down a whole rabbit hole there, and I know we can't. But
and I'll say one thing on that, that I didn't, right? Like if I could add another point that wasn't necessarily maybe the most spiritual, I don't know, maybe you can make a case for it. Part of that, right? Like part of that routine, I won't go into like cold plunge routine, right, Josh? But that, like, part of that routine, my phone, right? It's such a great, that focus you talked about, like being able to shut that notification down. I think I've got it set so that I don't get any notifications. I'm on like do not disturb or whatever from 9 p.m. to 11 a.m. And I told somebody that the other day, and they were like, 11 a.m.? Are you telling me if I call you, I won't get through until after 11 a.m.? And again, this is it's very strategic, because I know, right? Like, the best hours of the day for the maximizing, the best yield on my time is at, again, like, I get up at 3 a.m. Yep, that's stupid. Don't do that just because I do that. But by the time 7, 8 a.m. has rolled around, I've already budgeted the rest of the day for distractions.
Yeah.
Right. In what I've gotten done by that time.
Yep.
And so again, I haven't always been that intentional, haven't always been that strategic. But I do think, I do think it looks a little bit like Jesus.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And again, figuring out what works for you, what your place is, what your time is. And again,
you
just got to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's all of these is, I think we've been just trying to say, hey, just got to do it. And if you're not killing it, don't worry. I think all of us are, kind of a process of learning. So
absolutely.
Anything else that you'd add? Last thoughts, just the new person. All right, Joe, I'm going to do this today and tomorrow. What's the one thing you just tell them?
Yeah. Let me think for a second, because I think that I said this. So I don't know if I'm adding a thing here or not, but actually, yeah, here's what I would say. And this was on, so forgive me, Brant. I almost called him Brandon. Corey. Forgive me, Corey Heward. If
you almost called him his dad.
I did, but sorry, I work with Brandon a little bit more than anyway. But obviously, Corey's the better of the two. And I only say that because if somebody said that about my son, I'd be like, well, yeah.
Of course, yeah. That's fair. What we all want as dads, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I can't remember if he said it in his sermon, but I know it's listed in the resources under his message. It's that Dwell app.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of the Dwell app, and being able to listen. I've got a whole theory. We won't go into it, but being able to listen to the word. I think there's power in listening to the word, for sure, reading the word, but listening to the word. I'm very intentional about listening to the word. Silence follows that. Prayer follows that. And so it right, rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to be quiet here for a couple minutes and hear the word of God. No, I'm actually going to hear the word of God. And maybe the word of God that I hear in my silence is not that same word, but that's just, that's what I would encourage somebody is like, hey, if you're going to set aside some time like this, because I really think silence is like a multiplier spiritual discipline, because it's infused in fasting. It's infused in, reading the word,
Sabbath,
and in Sabbath, and in prayer, right? Like it's just so it makes those even better, right? It's like a seasoning, spiritual discipline where it flavors the others. So, but again, they're just so aligned, and that's why if you go back and you look at Corey's message and Jay's message, those, like, we all kind of mentioned in different language a very similar system, because those three for sure work
well together. Yes. That's a good point. That's a great addition. Well, again, man, thanks for hanging out with us today. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, man, it was a fun conversation. Man, I hope you guys have enjoyed this series, these podcasts. Really, my hope, again, and as I kicked off in June, was, man, I just know there's a lot of us all over the map. Whether we've got a great system in place that we're growing with Jesus, or some of us we got some broken things, or others of us, I know you walked in this summer and you're like, man, I haven't grown. Like, my system is destroyed. My hope and my prayer for all of us, and I meant it, was that, man, we walk out of this summer with God doing something great in us. And so, man, I hope that's been the case, and I hope that you continue these. And we would love to hear that. I'd love to hear how you've put these into practice and how you've seen God just use, like, that's the encouraging piece as we walk out and do this again. And just how you've enjoyed the presence of God, right? Out of Sabbath or silence or fasting or all of these things where you've just been intentional to spend time with Jesus. So man, again, I hope we don't just leave them in the summer. Hope we take them on with us as we go. And so again, hope you've enjoyed this series. Until next time, talk soon.
Can I say one last thing? Thanks, Nate. I saw him literally like almost finger on the nuke button, but I promise it'll be short.
Yes.
Here's the other thing I would say as an encouragement, Josh. Super quick. If a guy with this level of ADHD, this level of scattered, can engage in silence, so can you. You can do it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Love it. Great reminder. There you go. Hope to the ADHDers in the room. Listen.
And especially to the none, right? As well. But yes,
for
to
sure.
all the ADHD. If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Love you guys.
Yep.